Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is display. Let's take a moment to look at some of the definitions or the ways that we use this verb. The first way you might hear display used is to mean to make a public exhibition of something so that it can be easily seen. So here we might be talking about putting things in a public area or or just anywhere that others might be able to easily see it. A second way the verb display gets used is in connection to computers and phones, iPads, even calculators, and that is to show information on a screen. A third way you might hear the verb display get used is to mean to give a clear and visible demonstration of some quality, emotion, or a skill. So, to help us understand this third definition, perhaps we could think of seeing someone crying, right? And we could say they are displaying sadness, right? Especially if we look at other characteristics. Sometimes people cry when they're happy, but maybe there are other things we can see about that person. A fourth and probably less common way for you to hear the verb display used is in regards to birds and reptiles. And it's generally when a male bird or male reptile is going to behave in a specific way in order to attract a mate. You should know that the verb display is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, all you need to do is add ing to form displaying. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by adding ed. Now, our base verb, display, ends in a vowel sound, and vowel sounds are always voiced. This means that our past tense ending is just going to make a D sound, and we're not going to add an extra syllable as we say it. So it should sound just like this. Displayed, displayed. There aren't any additional phrasal verbs that we need to study, so we're going to move on and review a couple verb tenses now. Today, we're going to talk about the imperative and the simple present. Let's start with the imperative. We use the imperative to give commands. We are either telling someone to do a particular action, or in the negative, we're telling them not to do a particular action. There are no yes or no questions with the imperative, so these are just commands. And the imperative is rather unique in English. If you regularly watch these videos, you're probably used to me saying we're going to begin a sentence with a subject, a person, or a thing, a noun of some kind, right? Doing something, but leading into our verb here. But in the imperative, we don't have a subject. The subject, we say, is implied. It's understood to be you, the person I'm speaking to, and that could be you singular or you plural, or maybe you, the person I'm writing to. So what happens in the imperative is that I can begin my sentence with just the verb. And I'm not going to add any suffixes, no ing, no ed, no s here. It's just going to be the base verb. So an affirmative or positive example with our verb of the day might be, display the new merchandise in the front window. So here, maybe this is a manager or supervisor who's working in some kind of retail environment, a store of some kind, commanding or telling their employee to put these new items in the window so people can see them as they pass by. Now, if you want to make a negative imperative sentence, what you want to do is start with do not and then the base verb. Again, no special endings on the end of the verb. An example of this might be, don't display your nervous habits and lack of self-confidence during the interview. So this sentence is tying back to the third definition of our verb. So where we're talking about demonstrating something visibly. So this might be a command, something that's being said very forcefully to help someone prepare for a job interview. Now, sometimes students tell me that it can feel a little rude or uncomfortable just to tell someone to do something. So if you ever want to soften the imperative, maybe make it a little more polite, you can use the word please at the beginning or at the end, either place, just one though, just one please will do. You can add please to the beginning of affirmative or negative sentences. Now let's move on and talk a little bit about the simple present. We use this verb tense to talk about our habits and routines. So these are actions that tend to repeat again and again, maybe at a regular interval. Okay? And the trickiest thing, I think, about the simple present is that we have to pay attention to our subject. If our subject is I, you, we, or they, you're just going to use the base verb, no special endings. But if the subject is he, she, or it, you want to add an S to the end of the verb. Here's an example. She displays her leadership skills in each class. Okay? Again, we're back to that third definition where we're talking about a quality being easily seen. So maybe there are certain things this particular person does each day to help others in class or help finish assignments or projects. Right? So someone talking about this or uttering this sentence or writing this sentence is talking about how this behavior repeats again and again. Now, if you want to make a negative simple present sentence, again, we must pay attention to our subject. If our subject is I, you, we, or they, you're going to use do, not, and then the base verb. But if the subject is he, she, or it, you'll use does not, and then the base verb. Notice I'm not adding an S to the end of my verb here in the negative. Okay? An example of this might be, they don't display anger in public. Okay? So here, perhaps we're talking about a group of people who, when others are around, they're able to kind of keep their feelings known. But when they get home, right, then they might share their anger, or it might be obvious, easy to see from their words or actions. Finally, let's talk about making a yes or no question in the simple present. To do this, I start with do or does, then I'm going to have my subject, and then the base verb. Again, I don't add an S to the end of the verb in my yes or no questions. An example of this might be, does he display any other symptoms? This might be a question you hear from a medical professional, a nurse, or a doctor. Perhaps we're talking about a child that is sick and a parent is answering questions, right? So again, we're kind of asking, have you noticed, have you seen other things that maybe don't seem quite right? Now, let's move on and talk about some words and a phrase that are related to our verb display. And the first word we're going to discuss today is just the noun form of our verb. So the noun display, you'll notice, has exactly the same spelling and exactly the same pronunciation as our verb. The noun display can have a number of different meanings. We're going to talk about 4 today. And the first way you might hear display used is to describe some type of performance or event that is intended for many people to enjoy. An example of this might be, there will be a firework display after the concert. Right? So again, this is an example of an event. There are going to be fireworks in the sky to entertain people who had already been attending the concert. A second way the noun display gets used is to refer to some notable demonstration of a behavior, an emotion, a skill. Again, this is tying back to that third definition of the verb we talked about earlier. An example of this might be, in a display of good sportsmanship, they congratulated the winning team. So this sentence is probably describing a competition of some kind or a game of some type ending, and the losing team went ahead and said, hey, good job, way to go. And so we would call that good sportsmanship. Maybe they were shaking hands or giving high fives, fist bumps, who knows. But there was some type of behavior we could see, and that's what we're talking about, a demonstration. A third way the noun display gets used is to refer to a collection of objects that has been arranged for some public viewing. An example of this might be, the library has a display of Barbie dolls. Okay? So maybe 50 years worth of dolls to show how they have changed, or maybe what still feels a bit the same. But these are things for people or the general public to see and look at. A fourth way you might hear display used is, again, in connection to a lot of electronics. So any type of device where you might think of like a screen. So a way to visually present information or data. An example of this might be, the computer has a 19-inch display. I think that always means measuring diagonally. So in that kind of way, talking about really, again, you might think of kind of the screen for that. And I'm sure there's technical professionals who would say, maybe those aren't exactly the same thing, and you can correct me. But to the general public, many people are going to use those words in very similar ways. Another related word you might encounter is the adjective displayable. This just means that something is capable of or suitable for being displayed. An example of this might be, model miniatures are affordable, displayable, and enjoyable to collect. So miniatures are talking about really small items. So sometimes maybe you've seen people have things like couches or purses. They're not real couches or real purses. There are these very tiny objects that have been designed to look like the real thing. I borrowed this sentence from an advertisement trying to get people sort of excited to buy and collect these things. And they're encouraging you can put them in your home, in your office, in order to be seen by others, in order to be displayed. The last thing we're going to talk about today is a phrase. You might hear to go on display or be on display. Both of these are going to have a similar meaning, and it really means that something has been put in a particular place in order for people to see it. An example of this might be, the autographed baseball cards will go on display next week. So they're going to be put in some public place where many people can see them. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.